Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Debrief podcast. I'm Josh Durso, and as always, joined by my co-host Jackie Augustine. It's Wednesday, March 8th.
Yes.
And a lot has happened since the last time we were here. It has been a busy couple weeks here in the Finger Lakes. How's things?
Yeah, I feel like things always go really quickly, and
Admittedly, this podcast snuck up on the both of us.
it did.
But we're here, and despite some power issues
Amidst
before we came on,
the windy conditions, yeah.
we are here and we are going to do this. Opening thoughts? What are your opening thoughts on sort of everything that has been going on, whether it's in the state, local? What is your sort of and in the moment takeaway?
Well, I think that, again, we're seeing a lot of local action that I'm hoping is going to translate into some pressure on the state level when the legislature comes back next week to take up some of these things that they left undone in 2016 and the early part of 2017. So that will be interesting. I'm hoping that the issues that people are raising on the national level, we see the local impact, because that's where, in my view, we can make the most kind of direct impact by participating. So, yeah.
Is it strange? My opening thought or my opening hope is that at some point here we can start to get back to, I don't want to say normal, but I'm looking at like some of the really hyper local stuff and like the things that are happening here in Seneca Falls, and I have to admit that no matter what side of the landfilling issue you come down on, it is frustrating to see so many other issues, issues that would normally be in the forefront, being pushed way back on the back burner because of these bigger polarizing issues, and also, and I'm going to talk about this later too, but my opening, if there's an opening thought that I really want people to think about, is when you hear the words public hearing, it means the public needs to come out.
Right.
And there was a public hearing, a less exciting public hearing last night in Seneca Falls. It wasn't on a local law of landfilling, but it was on the salary of a highway superintendent.
Oh, yeah, I did hear about this. Yes.
And no one showed up, despite the fact that it has been a really polarized issue itself. You talk to people in the community, and they're split on whether 2 raises in 1 calendar year is appropriate when the rest of the town's employees were only afforded a 1% raise. So really difficult stuff. It just comes down to people coming out and being engaged.
Yeah, I think that's the worry, that if there's so many issues that kind of draw at people's attention, where's the energy left for the stuff that's going on every day that needs to be talked about and focused on? So I share your concern in that regard, definitely.
All right, so let's start right off the bat with that, the latest on landfilling, as we've called it. Local law number 2 was introduced. There was a public hearing scheduled for March 13th. Local law number 2 is a local law to rescind local law number 3 of 2016, the waste disposal law. It was the law that would have, in part, shut down Seneca Meadows and all landfilling operations December 31st, 2025. This was introduced at a special meeting. It was actually, I think, the day after the last time we did this podcast.
Yeah.
The meeting was held in the middle of the afternoon at 4 o'clock. A lot of opponents of the new local law felt as though it was kind of rushed through or rushed in, and it was the the decision was made before any of the board members got to that meeting. However you may feel about that. Last night we learned that the public hearing would be rescheduled to March 29th. That's a Wednesday at 5 p.m. instead of what was the other time, 4 p.m.
Right.
So a little later in the evening. It will not be held at the Seneca Falls Municipal Building.
There's not enough room.
Clearly not enough room. The courtroom, where the meetings are held, max can fit, I believe the fire marshal allows about 80.
Okay.
That's where it caps out. Realistically, though, that number is closer to like 50 or 55.
Comfortably.
Comfortably,
right.
yeah.
Right.
The rest would be standing only along the edges of the room. So yeah, I guess I'm really interested to see what your take is on this, because you don't live in Seneca Falls and you're sort of outsider looking in, I want to say objectively.
Yeah, well, I'd like to be objective. I mean, I think regardless of where you live in the Finger Lakes, the trash industry is unavoidable. I mean, it's part of your everyday experience, whether you smell it, you see it when you're driving, the trucks rattle your house when they drive by, you see them on the road, garbage is falling out of the back of the tractor trailers. I mean, everyone has some interaction on a daily basis with this waste industry, I think. So it should be on all of our radar screens. And I do tend to be skeptical when I hear things being scheduled at odd hours or in the middle of the day or in a location that clearly can't accommodate the people that have traditionally, the numbers that have traditionally come out. Yeah. I'm skeptical of the arguments that try to say that that's well planned. It might be well planned, but to what end? So my worry with some of this is that there's been so much public concern about the fate of the landfills and the fate of the community in regard to the landfill operations, that the idea that any public meeting would be done at a time or in a place where you wouldn't have the fullest group of people possible participating makes it look like that's intentional and not intentional in a good way. So you wonder who has a vested interest in preventing people from speaking and discouraging people from speaking. If you have it in a place that's standing room only, who does that benefit? If you have it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 5 o'clock in the afternoon when a lot of people around here aren't getting home till 5:30, 6 o'clock, who is that benefiting to not have those voices heard? And there aren't a lot of options in this issue. There are, the residents who support the landfill, the residents who oppose the landfill, and the landfill. So if the landfill's interests are being privileged over the residents, that is a problem. And that's certainly not something, whether you support the local law or not, I hope people don't support the idea that a corporate interest or a business interest would be more important to a governing body than the actual constituents and residents of that community. So that's my worry, the prioritization of interests other than the general public. Mm-hmm. So I think people need to keep an eye on that, because public officials are in their position to serve the public. Right. And even though it might be uncomfortable and it might be difficult to hear criticism, that's what they're there for. And they shouldn't try to get out of it by orchestrating things. Mm-hmm.
Now, there have been a whole slew of other topics happening in Seneca Falls that honestly would warrant our attention if it weren't for this giant landfilling issue that's taken center stage. My concern at this point, and I've talked about this a few different times, I really feel like we're nearing the stage of watered down politics. And I mean that by saying, you pass a local law, and then 2 months later you introduce new local law to rescind that local law. Right. And in theory, 2 months from now, a new local law could be introduced going the other way and back again. And I feel I understand why the systems that are in place exist, but at the same time, there has to be an acknowledgement of one side or the other. At this point, I'm looking at it just from, God forbid, eventually we need to move on to something else. We need to move on to the other issues. And the town board actually had, in my opinion, clean opportunity this year after local law 3 was passed to just move forward.
Right.
To just move on.
Right. Now that's the framework. Now how do you structure your decisions within that framework? That would have been good governance.
And I understand that, everyone, many of the board members, I don't want to say everyone because I haven't spoken to each and every one of them, but I know negotiating with Seneca Meadows was something that they genuinely wanted to do. And I totally agree, while they're here, while they're operating, negotiate, definitely. That said, it's like saying you can't do one while the other exists.
Right.
And I feel like that's really limiting, and it's a really complicated issue. And I'm not going to try and say that,
Well, this makes me think of something that that we're going to talk about. I'm not sure if we're talking about it next or sometime later, but this healthcare overhaul. I don't know. I hate to laugh about things so serious, but I was quite taken aback by the president's statement that, who knew healthcare was this complicated. And I think you're seeing the same thing on the local level when it comes to governing around this the trash issue and the fiscal issues related to that. I mean, the landfill will close eventually. Mm-hmm. Having that local law 3 that gave a specific date gives some predictability and some certainty.
Yep.
And then, like I said, good governance would say, okay, that's our framework. Now we need to rise to the challenge of now determining how to govern around those facts and that situation. And instead, there is like this knee-jerk reaction that, actually we'll just overturn that, which doesn't actually propose to solve any problem. It just reopens the uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And that seems like a very simplistic attempt to address a very complex problem. So I see that as being similar with this whole healthcare thing. It's not easy. And anyone who has to actually deal with that and has experience with navigating a complex system like that would never expect it to be easy. Mm-hmm. So I think when you say watered down politics, I'm not sure that that's what you mean, but that's how I interpret it. This idea that somehow there's a quick fix, we can just say this is what's going to happen, and then hopefully the details work themselves out.
When I say I should have clarified maybe a little better, I just mean in the sense that it loses value. The legislation that you're passing loses value, and people will not respect it. It won't be taken seriously if you get into this situation where you're just one side passes something, the other side rescinds it, throws it back, takes it another direction. And when you get into this sort of back and forth, it waters everything down, but it's also completely unproductive.
Yes,
it does
absolutely.
It leaves the town in a worse position than it was in the first place. And mind you, I hate to be this critical of all parties involved, but if Seneca Meadows or anyone prior to this local law had just simply given a date.
Right.
A date. Just a singular date. Not when this ends or when this expires or when we fill this airspace or, when Seneca Falls decides that they're not getting enough money from them anymore.
Right.
Take all of those factors out of it and make an objective decision about when you are no longer doing this.
Well, it makes you wonder, really, where the adults are. Because if you're running a business, you have a business model, you have a target date.
Yep.
If you are a government and you have a revenue source, you'd better have a good sense of when that money runs out. The fact that it does seem so open-ended and that it could go back and forth and nobody seems to want to commit to a date should be troubling to everybody, because that is not that is not how you make responsible public policy. I mean, it's just
Right.
not the way to do it.
Yeah. Obviously, this is going to be one to keep watching.
Yeah.
Fingerlakes1.com
It's not going away.
will have all of the coverage throughout this month and next month and the month after that. I'm sure this will continue on for many, many more to come. So as everybody can see up on the screen right now, the Affordable Care Act, you have
that is
some...
what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Okay.
we segued right... I like the way you brought that up because it made for a nice, smooth transition. So go ahead, talk to us a little bit. I know you have some discomfort,
I do.
I guess, with what the GOP has brought forward.
Right. Well, I actually think it's very much like what we're talking about in Seneca Falls, in that there is this knee-jerk reaction to what currently exists. We don't like it. We want to get rid of it. But when you look at the substance of what the alternatives might be, first, it's not clear that anybody can articulate what they're trying to accomplish, right? And if you're trying to make a policy, you need to have an end goal in mind. Otherwise, public policy is a roadmap. If you don't have a destination, then where do you get started, right? Then we're all just wandering around in the woods somewhere. So what's been proposed now, the House bill that was just introduced, is troubling for us locally, I think, because New York State, from all indications that Albany's giving, is not going to allow the Medicare changes and the Medicaid rollback to affect New York State residents. So in one sense, you can say, good, we can breathe a sigh of relief. Seniors and people who are lower income will keep, they'll have a safety net. However, that raises the question, if the federal government has pulled that safety net out in terms of funding, well, now who's paying for it? Now the state is paying for it. So on one hand, we want the protections to stay in place, but if we're going to advocate for them to be eliminated at the federal level, we better understand that that's going to have real implications on our income and property taxes at the state level. So I don't hear anybody talking seriously about that. And it's frustrating because you would hope federal representatives would be able to say, here is how this policy I'm supporting is going to impact my district. But instead, all we're hearing are the federal sound bites about why the country needs this and how this is going to help business. And on the state level, again, we're hearing, this is wrong, we have to protect seniors, but we're also not getting the cost estimates that might help people make a more informed decision about how they feel about it. I'm going to try not to take that yawn personally. See?
Yeah, that wasn't a personal yawn. That was I've been going since about 4:30 this morning.
No. I'm
yawn.
just joking with you.
No, so I think this is a really interesting, and this is obviously not hyper-local in the sense that, this is local legislation, but it is going to have a serious impact on people locally when all is said and done. And I am still really skeptical. I don't want to say skeptical. I'm really interested to see what this looks like when all is said and done and it's actually rolled out and finished, and assuming it makes jump all the hurdles that it needs to make and it gets to where it needs to go. Bottom line, though, and I've been saying this for like a year and a half now, Republicans, I am a Republican, have been hollering about the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare for a very long time. And I think we're at a place now where if the new product, and everyone, I think Democrats and Republicans would be in favor of a program of some sort or a piece of legislation that is genuinely better.
Oh, sure. Right.
And actually,
I think
works
everybody admits
better.
it could be fixed. Yeah.
But the bottom line, I feel like, is if fewer people are covered, if you have more of a gap created, it's a loss.
It is a loss.
It doesn't work.
And maybe this should have been my opening thought, because this is what's really been sticking in my brain lately, is that people seem to have really short attention spans when it comes to details, right? People want to talk about, oh, I don't like Obamacare, but oh, well, I don't want insurance companies raising my premiums so much. But okay, well, then let's actually talk about what would happen under various scenarios and try to trace those to their logical conclusion. Then, once you know what we're talking about, then we can determine which of those seems the most palatable. So, people say, well, we don't like entitlement programs. Okay, well, the proposal right now with this refundable tax credit, a refundable tax credit is by definition an entitlement program. So maybe that's not the right way to go. If it is the right way to go, how does that work? A refundable tax credit, by definition, is a refund after you've already outlaid the money. Now, their bill says that everyone will be allowed to keep their coverage. However, and there won't be a penalty, an annual penalty. However, if you let your coverage lapse, you'll get a 30% penalty for re-entering the system. So let's think about that. If I have to upfront my medical costs, my medical insurance costs, hoping I get this refundable tax credit at the end, which may or may not meet the cost of my insurance, and I miss a premium because over the course of the year, something unexpected comes up, my car breaks down, oops, I'm a little late on my health insurance payment, I'm kicked out right away. If I want to re-enroll, now I pay a 30% penalty, which I can't apply for a credit for. I'm not sure how many people, other than congressmen and senators, have enough discretionary income to be able to make a plan like that work. It sounds like a boon to the companies that are going to get paid one way or the other, but I'm not really sure how that helps the majority of people in the country in the economic situation that we know is the reality.
Yeah, and I feel like when it comes to this entire debate around how insurance should work or how it should be paid for, I think a lot of the conversation gets lost in the fact that healthcare in the United States is incredibly expensive.
Right.
Whether you're
Yeah.
going to the doctor, whether you're getting an x-ray, I am recovering from a broken hand. I don't have a cast on anymore, but just, you can pick and choose. You get the bill from the hospital and you go down the list and you see before insurance comes in and saves the day, because literally they do. You see the incredible cost associated with every single thing. And it's just if there is a problem with our healthcare system, and it goes well beyond any Affordable Care Act or any American Health Plan or whatever you want to call it, and it goes back to the fundamental cost of service problem.
Which is still an insurance issue,
Yeah.
because a lot of the thing driving the cost of actual provision of care
Right.
is malpractice insurance, and the cost of hospitals and doctors doing their business. Practicing their profession, doing their business. But the cost for them to do that, which then people will say, well, that's the malpractice attorney's faults, and everybody's got a little bit of blame to share here. So a really comprehensive reform bill would have a piece of each of those, that spectrum of issues, be part of it. Prescription drugs, but people like sound bites, so we end up getting, like you said, watered down stuff that's just, well, we're gonna replace this, and this probably isn't gonna work any better either, but at least we can say we got rid of it.
I'll be the first to admit I would love a simple fix to this big, messy problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist, but at some point I feel like you have to kind of acknowledge that you're going to have to take bits and pieces from all sides, and you're going to have to sort of fix 5 or 6 industries to impact that one that you're trying to affect, which is the insurance and the many problems that come along with that. So Another interesting, this is sort of in that same vein because this is one of those issues that's driven by party politics right now. The women's strike in Geneva that's happening right now, happening for a whole host of reasons. Um, your thoughts on it was well organized in a very
Yeah,
short amount of
it really
time.
was. And I mean, it's International Women's Day, and this strike and protest was just one portion of it. And I'll say in full disclosure, I had no role in organizing it at all. So I'm not at all trying to, appropriate their efforts. But I do think it was well organized. Um, and I mean, hundreds of people were there. And the twist that I thought was particularly creative and interesting was the occupation of Congressman Reed's office. And, what that entailed was actually going into the office and then saying things that needed to be heard. Now, granted, the congressman wasn't there, but still, I think the act of bringing the people's agenda to the people's representative is something that is really fundamental to democracy. So, of course, that's an important thing to do. My concern, I guess, about the protest and the efforts in general are that while I think there was diversity in age, um, people of all ages, and I think there was diversity in gender. It was not just women participating in this women's strike and protest. Diversity in other regards. Some more measurable than others, race, ethnicity, economics. I think that is still cause for concern because really, if one of the goals, I think, was to demonstrate that if women stopped producing the work that we do every day, that things would not function.
Right.
The problem is most of the women in really critical areas where things would stop functioning if women were not present are not the areas where women in those positions have any freedom to not show up.
Right.
So that's still a work in progress, how to be as inclusive and representative as possible.
And I think, I look at it, I had Laura Salamandra, one of the organizers of the entire, I don't
Yep.
even want to just call it a protest because it was so much more than just a protest.
No,
I looked at the itinerary, she sent that over to me last night. It was literally like a full day of, I would almost call it festivities.
Yeah, it was like an ideas conference,
Yeah.
which is great. It was about actually putting something forward. Yeah.
It's awesome to see something like that organized on the very local, small scale. It was huge. It blew up in a very short amount of time, and it
Right.
was even, I guess, it was talked about on NPR radio, which kind of gives you an idea of the scope
Yeah,
of,
that's great.
That said, I agree with your points, and I also would add to it that I think there has to be, not an end game, but there has to be sort of layering that
Right.
happens with it. Like, I think the protest is step one. They are taking, many of the people who are involved are taking other steps, but you have to get people engaged across all of those steps in a very big way if you want to truly affect change.
Yep.
And that's the challenge. Like, they've done a really good job of keeping people engaged on a whole variety of issues, environmental issues, social issues, the whole nine yards. And kudos to them for doing that. But
Right.
it's a very long fight. Like, it's
Yeah.
something that we may not even see significant change on for 10 or 15 or 20 years.
I hope it won't take that long. But yeah, I mean, true political action is never a one and done. You can't just show up
Yep.
and say something and then back away. It is a constant being in front, putting yourself out there, getting the information, saying what needs to be said, putting up with whatever flack comes your way for doing that. And It's a long process. It's not, like I said, people who have short attention spans are not going to find satisfaction in a movement
Right.
like that. So yeah.
So another one of the issues that we wanted to talk about tonight was one that I came across, and then I started reaching out to people and started talking to people, and property taxes. So let me give you a little background, and then I want to hear your opinion on this, because after giving you sort of the first exposure to it earlier, I'm really curious to see what someone else thinks about this. So a provision within the proposed New York State budget includes an option where every taxing body in the state would be able to accept payment plans like across the board. Any type of payment plan structure they wanted to set up, or in theory, it's kind of worded so vaguely that maybe even the taxpayers would be able to sort of have some control over it. County officials are really concerned. So I talked to Seneca County Manager John Shepard, and I listened to an interview that the Auburn Citizen did with the real property tax accountant, or I believe that's the title, in Kiwi County.
Okay.
And they both said the same. They both echoed the same concerns. How do you administer a policy like this without bloating costs at the county level to accept those? Because the interesting thing I thought was that, I'm talking to John Shepard about this, and he says it comes down to not having the resources or the applications to accept those payments. And there is another vague little caveat within it that says some body could possibly propose a local law to prevent it, to stop it if you don't want. But okay, so the perception of that would be terrible if a county did that. It would be like, you want all your money up front or nothing else. But this just seems like a really terrible idea. And let me qualify that by saying this. I don't think the concept of saying, hey, Jackie, you can pay your property taxes in 12 installments if you'd like.
Right.
I think that's awesome. But what I don't think is awesome is, especially understanding and having a little bit of background on the tech side of it, what you have to have in place in a computer, to the security, the Seneca County had just gone through a 2-month debate within the Board of Supervisors over the county manager's interest in buying a program to accommodate something like this.
Okay.
So with so much friction on additional spending at the county level, it seems ludicrous to me that you would introduce a new provision that would require the county to spend more for convenience. Now, if the county could make it happen and just do it anyway, giving them the ability or the authority to do that, I guess that's fine. But it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because this wasn't on my radar screen at all. So just the 2-second introduction of it, I thought it sounds to me like a technology problem, right? It seems like the missing piece is that some of the county administrators are thinking, oh, we're actually going to have a physical person receiving payments all the time and doing this accounting. And, I could see how that would be burdensome. But there does seem like there would be a technology solution to that. Now, unfortunately, in the realm of government, it seems like all the technology solutions people find or are offered usually cost way more than they would in the private sector to achieve the same goal.
So just a quick note here, that piece of technology, the program that they argued over, that Seneca County argued over last year, I believe was in the $35,000 in one-time installation fee, and then a few $1,000s every so often to maintain the service, to keep it going, because it would mostly be computerized.
Right. Yeah, so, but I understand, I think, I could see, I don't know if this is the actual motivation for this proposal, but I can see how, particularly if the agenda is to help people stay in their homes, how having payment plans for property taxes without associated penalties would be really great because, especially with seniors who don't have their property taxes in escrow. So a lot of people are really disconnected from their property tax bill because it's included in their mortgage payment. The bank takes care of it. Maybe they adjust it each year if the taxes go up, and then you realize what your property taxes are. But not everybody has that situation. A lot of people are paying every year that tax bill in a lump sum or two. And I think being able to make monthly payments would be excellent. I mean, in Geneva, we had this with the water bill. I mean, the water bill is billed quarterly, but a lot of people said, it's difficult. It'd be nice to be able to do it monthly because especially if there's an issue and you have a leak one quarter, trying to come up with that lump sum is difficult. But again, it is a technology issue. So anytime a proposal like this is made, which seems on the face of it to make good sense, it should have accompanying dollars for implementation. It shouldn't just be said, okay, well, here's what you're going to do. And if you decide you can't handle it, you can't afford it, and you want to opt out of this, well, then you can pass a law and you can tell people that you're still going to make them just make 2 installments and you're going to pay the administrative fee for that. I don't like that. I think that if this is a real solution, then you actually need to invest in the solution. Don't go halfway by just saying you should do this, but you're on your own to do it.
Right. And I think that was the note that I made to myself coming in here was that, I like the concept,
right,
but at least say, okay, and we'll front the counties this much money to, or at least a percentage of the total bill to implement something like that. But even beyond the technology side, according to the officials that I talked to, it seemed like there would be some personnel expenses that would also be incurred in that. So, it's one of those things where it's a really complicated issue, and of course, everyone would love to be able to make monthly payments, but the state would have to meet the counties halfway,
right?
I think.
Well, and I can think of a whole lot. I can think of better and more impactful ways to reduce the property tax burden on people other than just making it more convenient to pay the very high taxes. I guess that if you could lower the taxes through some creative solutions that keep floating around that people can't seem to get any traction on, then it wouldn't really matter if you had to pay once or twice a year or if you could pay monthly, because it would be easier to budget for all around. But it's a different topic.
It's unfortunately not the world we live in right now.
Yes, that's true.
So sticking with the state, what have you seen out of both chambers thus far? Good, bad, ugly, medium?
The main objects of my concern at the moment are that at the end of 2016, this independent commission recommended against a salary increase for the legislature, which I don't mind. I mean, I don't think that based on their performance, they were deserving of a huge pay increase. However, they had also recommended, this independent ethics commission had recommended that the legislature preclude outside income, or at least set a cap on it that would be more like the congressional cap. So right now, if you're a member of Congress, you can earn outside income, but no more than 15% of your base pay. And if you did that in New York State, the base pay is about $79,000. So sure, you want to do some speaking engagements, you have some private work that you need to get done. Yeah, you can make under $10,000. That's fine. But if you look at the outside wage earners, I mean, Zolio, prior to retirement, the last disclosures are for 2016, obviously. He's in the $150,000 to $250,000 outside income bracket, which is the top tier. There are only about 5 other legislators, some Democrats, some Republicans, all attorneys. And The problem with outside income is, especially with law firms, is that that money is tied to a performance that no one can peek into, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of disclosing your sources of income is based on the idea that if we knew who was giving you money, we could guard against conflicts of interest. But if you're working for a law firm, in the case of Nosolio, like Harris Beach, which has its fingers in a lot of pots around the state, in a lot of they have a group that defends that works to lobby about hydrofracking. They have a group that's defending the gas storage. They do a ton of development work. They're the IDA representatives for a bunch of places, a lot of counties, not mentioning any in particular. But, if there's that much business being done by these private law firms in the districts of the representatives who are receiving it, like Tom O'Mara, he's another one of the top earners. You're getting 3 times your salary from another source. Where does your allegiance lie?
Mm-hmm.
So the recommendation that this be curbed and that there be an independent commission that could keep tabs on this is something that was recommended, that the legislators said during election time that they intended to push for and take up, and so far nothing. Mm-hmm. So that's a concern. That's a concern I'm having.
So I'll jump in real quick here. My concern is generally that, like you just pointed to it, you hear about certain things, certain bills or certain measures or certain ideas, mm-hmm. and they get a lot of steam, a lot of traction, yep. and then all of a sudden a year passes, another year passes, and you get these back to back to back to back. Brittany's Law would be a great example.
Yep.
5 times, I believe, it's passed Senate, installed after that.
Right.
Probably going for 6. It probably will again, mm-hmm. go 6 for 6, and then go nowhere after that. That's the problem to me. Like that is the issue. There needs to be some sort of, and I don't know how, I don't even want to get into how you would possibly manage our system, the system, in such a way where it ultimately just comes down to people needing to work together, elected officials needing to work together, cross party lines, whatever it takes. I don't know how you fix that. I mean, addressing outside income seems like the absolute simplest way to, I don't want to say clean things up, but just create transparency to a point where you eliminate concern. Like you eliminate concern that people might have in the back of their mind. And it makes it easier for the elected official. It makes mm-hmm. it easier for the people who are being represented. It makes it easier for everybody along the way. And it appears as though they don't want it, right?
Right.
And whether that's true or not, I would almost be, and this is just my own 2 cents, I would almost hazard a guess that they aren't opposed to it. It's just one of the many things that gets lost. And what was that? I had seen numbers last year where thousands of bills are introduced, mm-hmm. and some ridiculously small number actually get a vote. And it's like, how can you really truly absorb? And this is a big ticket item, so this is something that they obviously have a lot of exposure to. But how are you, to say that these thousands of bills have legitimate chances?
Well, I mean, if you look at the websites of any state elected officials, I mean, happens at the national level, but there's enough attention on that. So, on the state elected officials, Assembly and Senate, it's always so-and-so is co-sponsoring this bill, so-and-so is backing this, so-and-so is speaking about this in committee. But if you try to follow that to see, well, what have they actually voted on? I mean, this is the point you're raising. I think the system has been set up to basically allow grandstanding without governing, and requiring an up and down vote at the end of each legislative session for any bill that's introduced. I think that might seem like a simplistic solution, But I think that that would actually first reduce the number of bills that are introduced, because I think people might be more collaborative, working together, saying, look, we don't want to have to vote on 1,000 things. Let's see if we can bundle some of these together. Let's reach consensus. These are our shared goals. But it also gives the voters accountability, because then you can say, okay, under ethics reform, there were 10 bills that came forward. My senator or assemblyman voted against all of them. Or my senator or assemblyman put forward this one and couldn't get any support. Then people actually have a track record you can start talking about. And it's not just public appearances and checks and sponsorship of stuff. It's actual legislation. And that seems to be what's missing at the state level a lot.
Agreed. So we are getting to the end of the show here today. So let's talk.
Oh, good. Well, I have lots of things
Hits
that'll
and
roll over to
misses.
the next one then, because we didn't even get through. I've got lots
and
of bills of
misses.
concern.
So I think, well, I'll go first. My miss, I'm going to do miss first.
Okay.
My miss is, and I'm sure you must have seen this, the picture that came out last week after our first round of crazy winds. Now we're experiencing round two, but
Right.
after round one, a picture went around social media of the Ontario County landfill, the gate on the outside, and just a wall of trash
Yeah.
bags.
And that's just what the fence caught.
I do not consider myself pro or anti landfill. I try to, because I'm covering these stories, I try to be objective and sit in the middle. That's just wild. Like,
Yeah.
that's just a wild miss. Literally, that is a miss.
Yep.
To not have the mechanisms in place to prevent something like that from
Right.
happening. Say, I have, to my knowledge, and I have my entire life driven by Seneca Meadows. I've never seen that happen there. And at least not at that scale. That was literally a wall
Yeah.
of trash bags, of just plastic bags and various other light pieces of waste. I'm sure it has happened, but to me, if you're in the business of landfilling, that is like public perception number one. That is the one thing you want to avoid have happening, is
Right.
have the trash literally like leave the landfill.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's my miss for the week. My hit, it was kind of tough to come up with a definitive hit. So I'm going to just say that it's not a hit, it's a hope. I am hoping that this conversation that's happening in Seneca Falls right now can meet a comfortable end for all parties involved, so that all of the other issues, the fiscal issues, the fact that Seneca Falls could use an audit, all of these other issues, the water issues, can be addressed. I really hope that Seneca Falls and the leadership in Seneca Falls right now can pivot when the time comes. And they had an opportunity in the first part of the year. They didn't take it. I'm hoping that if they do inevitably pass a local law rescinding the previous local law, that they pivot to the next step, which would be taking care of the other issues that are happening in Seneca Falls. And I know a lot of people would be unhappy if the new local law were passed. It would probably not be the best outcome, but the other issues have to start to be addressed. They have to be, flat out.
Yeah, well, I think that, my miss, to start with my miss, was going to be this seemingly, I watched the live broadcast of the meeting where they were proposing this local law too. I read your column about the need for an audit, and I agree that for me the miss is things seem amiss in Seneca Falls when it comes to governing, because the conversation does not seem focused, doesn't seem particularly mature. And by contrast, my hit is this focused set of ideas being articulated today at the protest, that here you have hundreds of people coming together and able to have respectful discussions about issues, because not all women agree on every single issue, but the level of dialogue in trying to hash out what's important, what's secondary, what do we prioritize first. If that was the way local government was happening, I think we'd all feel a lot more at ease.
Hmm.
And I think, regardless of how people fall on the partisan spectrum, we do need to be expecting more from the discussions that we're seeing when it comes to policy making, because I think the policymakers are letting us down.
Hmm. Agreed. So I do also want to plug our new Facebook page also while
Yeah,
we're
gonna
here,
check it out. And
at Debrief Pod. It's really simple.
okay.
We wanted to make that as simple as possible so people wouldn't get lost on the wild internet out there. But that's going to do it for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks on, I believe it is March 23rd. Let us know how you feel about all of the issues we discussed on Facebook. Check us out on that Facebook page and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, and we will be back in 2 weeks.
Finger Lakes one